happy first Sunday of Advent. My name is Abby, and I'm one of the pastors here. And doesn't it look beautiful in here? It's like preaching in Narnia. Like I went through the closet and yeah. Be sure to also check out the sanctuary. It looks beautiful. A team of our own Woods Chapel elves, right after worship last weekend, dug out all of our decorations and then spent much of Monday decorating. And another group of people were over at Raytown on Tuesday, making it look festive as well. So many of you, just like I did, maybe got to spend some time with family and friends for Thanksgiving. I went over to my brother and sister-in-laws. They live in Overland Park, and so I got to spend time with them and my mom and my little niece. She's adorable, almost 2. She gets to be a big sister come March, and so I get to be aunt again, which is exciting. And so my brother is 3 years older than I am in school years. So throughout our schooling, we ended up having many of the same teachers. One of those being our 8th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Youngmeyer. So looking back now, I don't think Mr. Youngmeyer was lazy. I think he just had some course objectives that he had to always accomplish with his 8th graders. Because my brother and I both had the same project 3 years apart. We had to trace our family genealogy from 5 generations, a minimum, from one side of our family. So my mom brought this for me for Thanksgiving, for my adult job now, so I could share with all of you. And so the winning recipe I learned out is that to have an older sibling, the same teacher, and a mother who's sentimental enough to keep your older sibling's project, because when I was in 8th grade, I just got to copy his work. So I definitely updated it and did a little bit better than he did, because I added some cool facts on the back. And so it was really fun to uncover some family history. My mom's side is from Ireland, and so I have a cool Ireland here. My great-great-grandfather came over just a little over 100 years ago on the Lusitania, just before it famously sunk. This same great-grandfather, the story is that he had tickets for the Titanic, but became too drunk and missed the Titanic, which is good news because I'm here today. Otherwise, I would not be here. So fun things like this are what you hope to kind of find when you start digging into your family history. Maybe you've done the same, and you hope to find like somebody famous that you've got a connection to, somebody who's done something special in their time or place. You don't really want to find that you're related to some serial murderer or somebody who's done a crime of some sort, but these are the people, because you kind of want to stray away from that cousin Eddie who's twice removed but still shows up at Christmas every year, right? But we all know, when we look at our family trees and we think about the universal Christmas or Christian family, we all have our people, we all have our stories. We're messy and beautiful. So in this series, Awkward Christmas, we're going to be looking at the family tree of Jesus Christ, but looking through the birth of Jesus in Matthew's gospel. So in our Bible, we have 4 Gospels, and they each tell from a different perspective to a different audience. And so only 2 of them actually tell us about the birth of Jesus Christ. So Mark starts with Jesus already as a grown adult at the beginning of his ministry. But then John takes us back to the beginning of the universe and writes this: "In the beginning was the Word," which is Jesus, "and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning." So it's very wordy there. But most people, whether you've been in church for a while or maybe you've been dragged to a grandkid or a niece or nephew's church Christmas pageant, you probably know some of Luke or Matthew's version of the telling of the birth of Jesus Christ. So Luke's version looks like this. The miracle of the birth of Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, actually got the gospel started here. And then we learn that John prepared the way in the womb all the way up to ministry for Jesus. Then an angel appears to Mary and says, "Do not be afraid, for you will conceive a son who will be named Jesus, who will be the Messiah." And then Mary is like, wait a second, birds and the bees have not happened yet, so how's that going to happen? I am a virgin. Fast forward, Mary and Joseph travel to Bethlehem. They're supposed to go there to sign in for the census. And as you know, there's no room there, so then Jesus is born in a manger. But Matthew's version, if we look at it at first glance, it's as if Matthew forgot writing 101. You know, you start with a hook to grab the audience in. But this is how Matthew starts. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Matthew goes on and on and on for 42 generations. I'm not going to do that this morning. You're welcome. So you likely skipped this first chapter of Matthew when you read it, when you come by it, because you're like, okay, I can't pronounce half of their names, and probably like some of your distant relatives, you don't even know how you're related to them. You don't even know their story. So you're like, I'm going to skip this. But Matthew knows this is important to his Jewish audience, so he included it for a reason, and we're going to find out this morning. Because he knows that they needed to hear that Jesus was connected to Abraham and David. Because he's about to tell them that Jesus is the Son of God, the very Messiah that they've been waiting for 2,000 years. So as a Jewish person reading or hearing this, they would have first said, Matthew, if you don't connect this man to Abraham or David, you're wasting your time and you're wasting our time. So you see, Jesus had to be related to Abraham to prove his Jewishness. And then prophecies in the Old Testament tell us that a Messiah would come from the David line. And so that's why he had to be connected to King David. So many genealogies, especially Jewish ones, you trace the family through the male side. And so it's usually father begets father, father begets son, and so on. But this one, Matthew lists out 4 women. Why does he do this? Because 3 of them aren't even Jewish. They're Gentiles. One is a prostitute, and one got caught up in adultery. Matthew doesn't try to hide the dirty laundry. He hangs it up like a stocking on the fireplace for everybody to see. This is crazy. So let's take a look at this, because Matthew here is almost ruining Jesus' image rather than proving it, some might say. But I think there's a reason why Matthew included this, because the Son of God's family tree wasn't as pure as we might want to think. So Matthew writes, Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. So we're going to look at Tamar's story in the weeks to come. So this is just a brief little synopsis here. But for today, I need you to know this. The Bible is more PG-13 and rated R than we ever like to think about it. We've cleaned it up for children's Sunday school, so when the children go home, that they're not being asked questions in the car on the ride home from church, okay? And sometimes we even clean it up for Sunday morning. But here we have Tamar. She's not Jewish, and Judah was her father-in-law, but also her baby daddy. That's just how we're going to put it this morning. There was a scandal there. You'll find out more about it later. And then there's 5 more generations listed out, and I'm not going to read them. If you want to try, you're welcome to. But finally, Matthew drops the name of another woman here. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. So remember, Matthew is trying to prove Jesus' Jewishness. So he lists another non-Jew. The other major thing is that Rahab was a prostitute. But that wasn't her whole identity. She was a Canaanite, a hated enemy of the Israelite people of the time. But her faith and the recognition of the power of the God of Israel helped her protect 2 spies of Joshua, who was the successor of Moses, who was leading the Israelite people to the promised land. So this story in full can be found in the book of Joshua, but another place is our church sanctuary, in our stained glass window. Can you believe it? In our very own stained glass window, we have a prostitute for all to see. So, in our sanctuary, on the far side, we have these Old Testament stories captured in our stained glass window. And up in the upper right corner is Rahab and the spies. We as a church didn't have to include that story, and Matthew didn't have to include it, but I think it matters. So follow with me. Matthew goes on. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Ruth's story is a tragic romantic comedy turned scandal. So Ruth starts with a famine and a death, and then she gets on The Bachelorette, so to speak, and a Hallmark movie happy ending is how that book ends. But Ruth wasn't Jewish, she was a Moabite. Again, she then married a Jewish guy, so fits in the family. But the Israelites and the Moabites didn't get along, so that was an unhappy marriage right away. So next we have Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. So finally, we have our famous person that we've been searching for all this time. Matthew finally lists him out. So Jesse is often, we learn about Jesse through the Jesse tree. And so an artistic representation of the Jesse tree is often found in churches much older than ours. Many of them are in different countries. I got to see this one in Porto, Portugal earlier in the year. And so it's hard to see it because it's all made out of wood and it's very dark in there. This church was built in the early 1200s, and this is from the 1700s. And so Jesse is lying down on the ground here in this, and then a trunk is coming out of either his stomach or his chest, and then all these branches of the different generations, and they have little people on them, are showing the different generations leading up to a tree topper of Jesus and Mary, or just Jesus. So this can be complicated, and so throughout our history, churches have made this way of helping people understand our family tree. So there are so many more details about our family, our Christian family, than I can share this morning. So we are committing as a church to an Advent reading plan about our wonderful, beautiful, and messed up family. So that is a great way to invite you to read our scriptures, because there is beauty in these stories that we, even our ordinary selves, can find ourselves in. So be sure to sign up. This starts today, and that way you get to find out, hey, Jesus included and accepted and loved all these people and does the same for each and every one of us. So here's a few more connections I want to make here. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. What a way to be introduced here. Whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Now for Jews, this wasn't breaking news. It was kind of like a small town. Everybody knew everything about this situation. Everybody knew Uriah's wife and Solomon's mother was Bathsheba, and that David committed adultery with her, had a baby, and then tried to cover it up by sending her husband, Uriah, to the front lines of war. So did you catch that? An adulterer, a lovered baby, and here we have a murderer. The very person that Matthew is trying to connect Jesus with is messed up. So, drum roll here. Matthew finally gets to where we want. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is the Messiah. So Matthew here names a fifth woman, Mary, the mother of Jesus. A scandal of its own, one that we come to every single year to remind ourselves that it is a beautiful story. She is outside the social order, just like all the other women in this genealogy before her. The unconventional ancestors are all examples of how God moves in and through these obstacles of human scandals in a way to bring out the beauty in the world and to bring about the coming Messiah. So Matthew wanted people to know that even Jesus came from sinners, and that was okay. So Jesus didn't just come for sinners, but Jesus came from sinners. So again, Matthew creates this foreshadowing with this genealogy for all the next stories to come in his gospel. All the stories of insignificant, illegitimate, defenseless, tabooed individuals are beloved of God, he writes, and may become agents of God's work in the world. Matthew identifies with these people because he is an outcast in his own society. Fast forward through this genealogy, and Matthew includes his own inclusion as a disciple. Here, Matthew tells us that some disciples had already been called to the work of Jesus Christ, and they were going about from place to place to heal people and to share the good news. And this is where we find that Jesus heals a paralyzed man and then says, your sins are forgiven. And this raises the ears and the thoughts of the religious leaders of the time because they're like, only God can forgive sin. So who is this guy that's forgiving sins and healing people? And so this is where we find the backdrop of Matthew being called as a disciple. Matthew 9:9-13. As Jesus went out from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." So the Galilean region where all of this was taking place was occupied by Rome at the time. And Rome imposed taxes on every single thing that they could. They had big dreams of building many things and imposing their way of life and their culture and their beliefs on everybody around. And so the Romans utilized citizens of those regions to collect those taxes. So Matthew was one of these tax collectors found in opposition to his own people. So as long as Rome got their own cut, they didn't care if these tax collectors asked for more money to line their own pockets than they were asking for themselves. So to have leverage to collect this money, these tax collectors would have a Roman soldier near them. And by doing this, the Jewish people viewed tax collecting for Rome as something against that community. It was betraying your own people, betraying the law and even God. And so Matthew would have been an embarrassment to his family and to his people. And because he was ceremonially unclean by having that soldier near him, he couldn't do the way of life of a Jewish man. And so again, was an outcast. He was a traitor and an outcast, in a category separate even from sinners in his gospel. So this is the context in which he is called. And many of people like Matthew and others often turn away from God for this thinking. They believe that they have failed to do the right things, they have failed to live up to the right standard, and they have failed to believe all the right things. Their thinking is similar to what people think today. To be worthy in God's eyes, it must be based on what I do, what I believe. God will only accept me if I do and believe all these things. Only then am I worthy. Many of them will give up. They will give up on God and give up on the church because they believe the standard is too high. If they don't give up, they will try on their own merit to continue to live up and try to earn this love of God and to earn the love of the church. But the truth is, Matthew knows that Jesus changed everything. Jesus changed everything for Matthew, and Jesus changed everything for us because he changed the standard of who was included and accepted and loved. And we know this is something that we struggle with today. You know, I had an encounter with this man who appeared to be homeless just about a year ago. I was at the intersection of 470, the exit ramp going towards the stadiums, towards our Raytown campus. And I was stopped there, and you know when you're in a situation like that, when there's a homeless person and you try to avoid eye contact, I'll be honest about it, that you kind of try to figure out what am I supposed to do in this context. And so because I take that route many a times, I notice this person many a times. His face is in my memory. Eventually, he would make his way down to our food pantry. He would make it to the table, and eventually I learned his name. And about 2 weeks ago, he came up to me before our dinner church there for the table, and once again introduced himself to me and said, this woman today is somebody that I helped get away from a really bad situation. He shared with me that is what he does, is he helps women get off the streets and into better situation, specifically women out of prostitution. And he said that this woman has lost everything today because she had the courage and boldness to leave that situation. So can you help her find some clothing from the clothing closet? Will you help her find a warm jacket? And by the way, she's looking for a rehab to detox as well. So later in the night, we definitely found her clothes for the clothing closet and a warm jacket, and I connected them to Adam Dean, our director of recovery ministry. But later that night, as we were getting food in the buffet line, I went up to this man again as we were waiting, and I said, hey, I think it's a really noble thing that even in your circumstances, you are helping other people have a better life. And I said, thank you for what you do. And he wouldn't make eye contact with me, but I knew that he received that. I could tell it in his body language. And then he said, I'm making up for all the bad in my past. So that's why I do what I do. And my heart sunk. Because nobody should have to make up for anything. You hope to live a better life, but you should never feel like you ever have to earn anything again. And so I shared with him that I hope you know the past is the past. You can't make anything different about that, but you can make a difference in the future, and you already are. And so I hope that you know that you have a place of belonging here, that you are loved by God, and the grace of God covers everything that you might ever have done. So then that Thursday after, I get a call from Adam Dean, and he gives me an update. Hey, I made a connection with these two people, and by the way, they are sitting at this recovery place waiting for a bed to open. So this man had followed through with the line of work that he told us about, that he was helping this person, helping others one step at a time. I don't know much more about this man, but what I do know is that God is working in and through him, one person at a time. To some, he might just be a man living on the streets. Maybe we think that he doesn't have much hope, but I know and God knows that he has more to his story than we can ever think. And he is part of bringing about redemption in the world this day. So my hope for this man and for all of us to know is that whether we feel worthy of it or not, that we are grafted into the family tree of Jesus Christ. We have that grace, we have that love available to us, and there is nothing that we can do to earn our place in that family. It has been given freely to each and every one of us. You and I are part of this universal family that's broken and beautiful, simple and complex, diverse and ever expanding. And at Advent, when we look at this genealogy, we are to be reminded that these ordinary, broken people, they were worked with God. That God, through them, in them, and with them, made life in the world better and brought about the light of Jesus Christ into the world. And I believe today that God is still active, working through us, ordinary, broken people, to make a transformation in the world. And I believe as we think about hope today, that is the hope that we have, that we coming together can bring about the love, light, joy, and harmony that God has for us all. May that be our prayer, and may that be our hope.